Hello everyone, Ailuromage the Magic History Cat here. In my last two videos, I went over some very fun and interesting details about the Light Wardens and the Sin Eaters. But for this video, I want to do another examination of terminology. So today, we will be looking at Sage. Sage is actually my favorite healing class, and it's probably very noticeable that the abilities use Greek words, fitting as Sage was introduced in the same expansion we travel to Old Charleon, which is heavily influenced by ancient Greece. So just as the astrologian was designed with great care and attention to detail in astrology, Sage is more than just Greek words, but is actually designed primarily around what are known as the four humors. So before we actually get into the abilities, let's briefly go over what is called Humoral Theory. Often credited as originating from Hippocrates in ancient Greece, it was believed that good health is achieved when the four humors, or four fluids in your body, are in balance with one another, and that they share a connection to the four elements that make up the universe in ancient Greek theory. The four fluids are blood or haima, the element of air, yellow bile or xanthekole, the element of fire, black bile or melanachole, the element of earth, and phlegm or phlegma, the element of water. From this would be the foundation for an incredible amount of theory, associations, and discussion over the course of centuries. Personality traits, medical conditions, temperaments, and even connections to the planets commonly used in astrology were associated with the four humors. Haima is associated with the liver, xanthekole is associated with the spleen, melanachole was associated with the gallbladder, and phlegma is associated with the brain and lungs. So the sage is heavily tied to the humors and medical terminology, being a healer based around those four humors. So let's get into the abilities because we have a long list. Dosis is your basic starting damaging ability, becoming Dosis 3 at max level. Dosis is where we get the words dose and dosage in English, as in to take a dose, meaning it is being given to you, and that is what it means, a giving. So I suppose you are giving a dose of pain to the enemy. Diagnosis is your starting basic heal, and we use this word in English. You go to the doctor and are given a diagnosis, and it means the same thing in Greek. It is actually two words put together. Ginosko in Greek relates to knowledge of, or more specifically, to know. Dia means through or across or complete. So a diagnosis, the way we use it in English with our doctors, the doctor is acquiring the complete knowledge of our health. So then a prognosis, which is your party-wide heal, uses the prefix pro, which means before. Altogether, the word means to predict or to forecast. We use this word in English too, as a prognosis given by a doctor is a prediction of how your health will develop. Cardia is what makes Sage the unique healer it is, developing a connection to a party member that heals for all the damage that you deal. Cardia is where we get the word cardio in English, like the words cardiology and cardiovascular, which all relate to the heart, and that is what cardia means, heart. Igero is the sage's resurrection ability, and that is simply what it means, to revive. In Orthodoxy, you will probably hear this word as they use it to talk about the resurrection of Jesus quite often. Physis is an instant cast that grants your party regeneration. For those of you that are philosophy enthusiasts, you will probably already recognize this word from the physis and nomos theory and discussion that has to do with nature and law. So physis is quite the root word, as words like the Latin physica, which is the study of nature, and physical in English comes from this. So a few centuries back, the word physical was a little different than today, and it was used more for primarily medicinal discussion. Physical was talking about medicine. This is why we say physical exam in English, for an examination by the doctor of your health. Next is Phlegma, which is one of Sage's AoE damaging abilities. We already mentioned what Phlegma is. It's one of the four fluids associated with the brain and the lungs. A bad imbalance of this was called being phlegmatic, and this was associated with distant or apathetic behavior. So maybe this ability relates as the Sage is hurting others due to a lack of care or concern. So next we move on to Krasis, as it expands into a few other abilities. Krasis as an ability enhances healing properties of other healing actions. Krasis means mixture, so the ability functions as a mixture of other healing abilities together by enhancing their power. This then extends into Eucrasia, which is Sage's augmenting ability that turns Dosis into a damage over time ability and applies shields to diagnosis and prognosis. So Eu means good or well. Saying Eucrasia is like saying good mixture in English, which makes perfect sense because in relation to the four humors, Eucrasia refers to the balance of the humors. A good mixture of the fluids leads to good health. So then you've probably already deduced that Dyscrasia is the opposite, and being a rather strong damaging ability of the Sage, it also makes perfect sense. Dys meaning bad or imperfect, so Dyscrasia basically means bad mixture. An imbalance of the humors or a bad mixture of the fluids leads to pain and sickness. Next is Soteria, which enhances the effects of Cardion for the next 4 instances of healing. Soteria as a word means deliverance or salvation, but it is also the name of a Greek goddess. Soteria is the goddess of safety and protection, so in relation to the game, it works well in multiple ways. Icarus is Sage's dash, able to instantly rush to a party member. I think Icarus is pretty well known in pop culture as that one main character DPS that ate Helios's Exaflare, so this one is rather self-explanatory as the Sage literally sprouts wings. Before we cover the next 4 abilities, let's discuss Adderskull and Kole. Adderskull is Sage's special job gauge, and it functions as recharging tokens that allow you to use 4 of Sage's instant cast abilities, which we will get to in a moment. Adderskull is not actually really connected to the Greek language, but rather a combination of Middle English and Germanic words. Adder means snake, and though we use the word adder for a specific classification of snake today, historically adder was widely used by the common folk in Europe to refer to snakes that would usually be encountered on their farms and in their homesteads. The snake they probably encountered so frequently is what we now know as the common European adder or common European viper today. Then there is gall, which just refers to bile. So saying Adderskull is like saying snake bile. Now, in ancient Greece, snakes were associated with healing and medicine. That is where this comes from. So Adderskull functions as your tokens in order to use 4 moves, all sharing the suffix of Kole. Kole is Greek for bile. So we have the 4 abilities that Adderskull interacts with. Taro Kole and Kero Kole, I believe, are connected, as Taro Kole is an AoE damage reduction and Kero Kole is a single target damage reduction with a heal attached, but these 2 effects cannot stack together. The prefixes Taro and Kera, or Tauros and Keras, mean bull and horn respectively. So with all of these things in mind, I'm certain they are linked, though I personally cannot determine anything deeper if there is something here. Feel free to comment if you know. And then Druokole and Ixokole are big meaty heals that are single target and AoE respectively. Druo is where we get the word druid from, relating to the trees and forests, as druo is from drus, meaning tree. Ixo, now I believe it is drawing from ichor, which is fluid that runs through the veins of gods, which matches perfectly with the 4 humors and Sage's theme. Feel free to comment on this one if you know as well. So these 4 abilities take Adderskull, the snake bile, to use, as again, Kole also means bile, so you are using bile as a source for healing properties, balancing the fluids. Next is Zoe. Zoe is a big buff to your next healing ability, and Zoe means life. Pretty fitting. Next is Pepsis, and Pepsis grants a quick heal by consuming the effect of Eucrasian diagnosis or prognosis. Pepsis in medical terminology relates to the digestion of food, which makes sense as this was considered a huge determining factor in the balance of the fluids. Toxicon is another AoE damaging ability, and the English word toxic comes from this. Toxon means bow, and toxikos means arrows or archery. Toxicon in English basically means poison arrows, so the Sage is shooting poison arrows at the enemy. This coincides perfectly with Sage's other job gauge, the one it uses for stacks of Toxicon, appropriately named Adder Sting, basically Snake Sting. Haima is a shield that heals as it takes damage for a total of 5 times. Haima means blood, as previously mentioned, and Haima is associated with a sanguine temperament, so someone with good Haima is hopeful and positive. Pan Haima is the same thing as Haima, but affects the entire party. The prefix pan simply means everything or all, so the ability makes sense. Rizamata immediately grants 1 token of Adder Skull. Rizamata is essentially just referring to all of the 4 elements together in balance. The 4 humors are each associated with the 4 elements that the ancient Greeks believed to make up everything in the universe. So having good balance is giving you more Adder Skull, more bile for the fluids. Holos is a party-wide instant heal and also reduces damage taken. Holos means whole or completeness. The word Catholic actually comes from Katholikos, meaning universal, as this is a combination of kata, meaning according to, and holos. This is why Catholic means universal church, or the whole church. Pneuma is probably one of the coolest abilities in the entire game, hands down. It's literally a big laser that deals damage and heals party members. Pneuma means breathe or to breathe. Interesting how we have 2 healers in game with abilities relating to breathing, as the white mage uses the Latin term afflatus. So we have the white mage that's associated with the Christian church using many Latin terms, and the sage that's associated with Greek medicine, and of course using Greek words and terms and the 4 humors. Another really cool thing about the sage is obviously their weapon, the Noliths. Nolith is a combination of 2 words, nous relating to the mind or use of the mind, and lithos meaning a rock or stone. So a Nolith is a stone controlled by the mind, of which there are 4 of them, 1 for each of the 4 humors, creating a perfect balance. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I hope I was able to provide some interesting or useful information. These videos take a very long time to make, so if you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like or comment, and subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one. Thank you again, and remember to pet a cat today.